and just try to stay out of the way of the story. Try every decision, make it to serve your core story, and you will make something compelling that people like to watch.
You're watching CineD, supported by B&H and CVP.
It's very nice to see you, to meet you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Masha. Nice to see you in person. This is very cool. I'm excited to do this.
I'm also very excited too. But let's just do a little introduction, because maybe somebody is watching us for the first time. So Graham is a seasoned filmmaker, director of photography and producer in particular, as well as a long-term CineD contributor and writer, and filmmaking educator with multiple educational courses on our platform mz.com. Did I forget something, Graham?
No, I mean, I think that sums it up fairly well. Also, occasional director, but it sounds like a lot of titles, but director, DP, or producer, not really anything outside of those three. And I don't wear all those hats at the same time sometimes. It just depends.
Okay, but still you have a lot of expertise in all these fields. And that's why it will be really, really cool to talk about your latest project, which is why we are here now. But maybe before we dive into behind the scenes stuff and making of, could you please tell us a little bit about this project in general? What is it? And also maybe about your particular role in this project.
Yeah, so Goblin Mode is a tabletop role-playing game in the vein of other shows you may have heard of, like Dimension 20 or Critical Role. I myself came off a season of Dimension 20 and went to go work on Goblin Mode in between various sort of doc and scripted and commercial projects. Goblin Mode is essentially a bunch of comedians, funny folks, actors sitting around a table and going on a long-form adventure that spans 20 episodes. So we're really going on a journey, and we can dive into the story, into the individual story of these characters in a way that you just can't on sort of shorter form content. All these episodes will be available both in a podcast version, wherever your fine podcasts are served, and also on Geek and Sundry's YouTube channel, which is an easy search to find. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And if you're familiar with D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, it's that sort of vibe. You're rolling to make decisions as you proceed through the journey, and you're also fighting various beasties. But it's in a way that you can understand the story if you're just listening through podcast or if you're just viewing the show online. So really, you could even watch episodes 1 and 2 visually, and then hear number 3, and I think you'll be able to follow the journey as our heroes go on it.
Maybe, Graham, could you explain to us what this tabletop RPG game concept is all about? Because I guess some people don't really know what it is, and what can we expect when we watch the show?
I was brand new to this format up until about 2-3 years ago when I started working on a show called Dimension 20. So in the beginning of a campaign, we call it, you start by creating your characters. You create your characters, or you have an idea what your characters are, and then as the adventure progresses, you can level up your characters, you overcome various challenges, and the whole story is sort of constructed by a game master, sometimes called a DM. In our case, Amy Vorpahl is wearing that hat, and Amy helps structure the story, helps guide the individual characters to some extent, but of course, being fully improvised, some things are going to be a surprise to Amy, some things are going to be a surprise to me as a director and DP. So it's this wonderful give and take, and it's a really refreshing way to tell a story because we have some ideas about how this might go. We have some bullet points that we hope we'll get to all experience together, both the crew and the cast, and that we'll get to see that story unfold, but there are no guarantees. And all of these characters, they have a certain number of hit points, and when those hit points go down to 0, stuff could happen. So I hope that's a good explanation. Masha, did I do okay? I understand you've played some of these before, perhaps?
Yeah, I think you did. And I think it's particularly exciting that even you, as the director, do not know what can happen and whether maybe some of the players will have to leave the game, right? So that's actually a very interesting. Do you intervene at any points? Do you sit there and think, okay, no, we can't do it at all, we should do something else?
The question is, do I intervene? Rarely. It's mostly up to Amy to intervene in sort of interesting ways. And there might be times where I'll speak up just as an audience member if I'm perhaps missing the flow of the story. Because, we got into this wanting it to be widely accessible to people just now getting into the TTRPG genre, or people that aren't, 5-10 years into understanding this medium. And in that sense, I make a good sort of general test case as the viewer. And if I'm not following or I feel like we didn't land a moment like we could have, I'll definitely speak up. But those are just so few and far between. For the most part, the cast nails it. We don't have a lot of cuts. Amy crushes it the entire time, and that's what's incredibly exciting. And from somebody a filmmaker like myself, who plans and plans and plans, can also be a teeny bit stressful because it's just very unclear to me what might happen. So it's a little stressful, but it became more exciting, to be honest, as the series progressed through filming. You told already that this will be 20 episodes. Do I understand correctly that it is one storyline? So it's just one journey, one campaign, which is divided into 20 different episodes? You understand correctly. Yeah, and there's even episodes that follow the main episodes that are sort of talkback episodes where the cast, the actors as themselves will kind of go through that little chunk of the journey that they just went on and talk about, key things that might have happened in one of our core episodes. So that's nice too, because sometimes, the character will answer as the character, but sometimes I want to know the actor's thoughts on a moment. Like, was that as insane for you as it was for me watching? And so you get that as well in the talkback episodes.
Okay, so you also have some conversations with actors filmed in form of interviews where they are speaking about playing, right?
Yeah, well, they're at the same table, and it happens sort of immediately after a main episode happens. Then you get to watch that sort of, around the table Q&A format that Dan Casey, one of our actors and the intrepid executive producer, moderates.
Well, that's crazy. I can imagine that it's an immense amount of work, right? Because I don't know, how long does one campaign take? How long did it take you guys to come through the campaign? Not to film it, but to come through it.
Yeah, so filming took about a month all in, which is a significant amount of time. It's very important too that we get the media right in terms of how we're recording this, which, normally kind of a tiny thing. Memory cards are fine. They work fairly well these days. Knock on wood, everyone here and at home. But we used a redundancy system in the form of an Atomos monitor on each of our Fujifilm cameras, as well as recording to Type B CF Express internally. Simply because the campaign is so long, and to interrupt the flow because of a camera going down for a power reason or a media being full reason just wasn't something I wanted to do. So we have a ton of memory cards / Atomos SSDs on this project to make sure that this feels like we're moving in a particular way, that we never lose that momentum throughout each of our episodes.
Okay, yeah, I would really love to talk about making of this production, because I assume it is very different to normal films or normal TV shows. And you already told me that it was the first time for you to be on such a show. So maybe can you explain what else is different, apart from, of course, tons of material and that you have to make sure that you record everything that you need. What is also different production-wise?
Yeah, so, if you've read my stuff on CineD, or if you've seen me on any of CineD's platforms, you know that I, do documentary and I do scripted stuff. Also occasionally multicam shows, which I would put this in that category. This is a multicam, live feeling stage show. In that category, most recently, I worked on Game Changer for Dropout, and then Dimension 20, also for Dropout. This has a similar format to that, in the sense that we have multiple cameras going, in this case, 3, 4, we have 5 cameras going, I had to count that for a second. So 5 cameras going for the entirety of filming, and we're cutting around to those cameras as we go. Obviously, there's some concerns there around amount of memory available. There's concerns there around just what optics you're using on these cameras. Occasionally we would shoot 4K if we needed to punch into singles. Both of the side cameras on the show are a 2-shot from each of those cameras, and we punch into singles 4K, obviously allowing us to do that. And we were using a CineShooter Plus from Kessler as sort of a wide roving shot throughout the campaign, because I would never put a camera operator through the act of having to constantly dolly back and forth over episodes that may be as long as 2.5 hours. I try to be nice enough to our camera operators for that. We also went ahead and used Teradek TV, their streaming platform, to stream off-site. Our soundstage wasn't huge, just as a function of space, so we needed to keep various departments away from the stage, and we used Teradek TV to stream to those departments, including hair and makeup, including the post folks, story team offsite. And all of these things obviously are different from your typical sort of run and gun doc project. We're working off very large story documents that read a little like a choose your own adventure kind of document. In video games, we would call this like a wireframe doc, i.e. if you choose option A, option B, C, D, E might happen. But I want to be clear that very often the cast brought Amy and the rest of us in entirely unthought of ways to different places that we could not conceive of. And we have story meetings. Shout out to Ehlers Sheldon, our incredible story producer that worked with Amy Vorpahl on the story throughout filming. And, they had long story meetings where they talked about world building and just making each location feel like a complete place. And then, the cast would surprise us and make a decision that all of us didn't think they would do, and we just had to roll with the punches. But all the things I'm describing, hopefully, Masha, you understand, are just very different from our typical run and gun doc where we're following contributors. We might have kind of a beginning, middle, and end figured out on a documentary, but also the fact that there are comedians. Occasionally you'll hear an off-camera giggle from me, maybe bleed into the soundtrack, or you might hear some laughter from our audio department or the camera department, and that's just part of it. We left that in because we wanted it to have kind of a live show feel to it. But
also from the story perspective, as you said, as I know, these games are usually very open. So you have a world, you build it, right? And you have a storyline, and as you already said, you think about some maybe different quests or different locations, but at the same time, it can happen that the comedians, the actors, they decide to do something else and go into some completely different direction. Does it mean that you have to have these story meetings on the go? I don't know, maybe the next day your writers sit together and think about what do we do next? How will this location look like? And is it always an ongoing progress, an ongoing process of creating a story?
Yeah, so Dan Casey, Amy Radcliffe, actually, shout out to those guys. Dan, who also a member of the cast, obviously an executive producer. Amy, a very talented writer in her own right that works at Geek and Sundry and Nerdist. They did some of the initial world building conversations. You know, what kind of place is this? What kind of locations could we visit? So there was a little of that, but because Dan was, also in the cast, very quickly we had to kind of move beyond and build on that world document. So Dan didn't just kind of know the whole environment and where we were going, if that makes sense. There was a lot of conversations initially about what kinds of locations could they go to. In fact, there's a television screen mounted in the middle of the table with a top-down camera, and occasionally you'll see a 3D rendered environment. Shout out to the Distoli brothers who made those 3D environments. But there's a lot of wiggle room when they get to those environments, or if they get to those environments at all. And this also translated into my role as director of photography with the lighting. So I was using an image-based lighting system that several companies are dabbling with lately, but especially Light Panels in this instance. We were using their system. And I would have various lighting cues on iPads around me. And because I didn't quite know when they would get to places, I would often mix cues together in real time, or I would solo a particular actor if they were having sort of an internal moment, a particular character. So, I had a bunch of buttons in front of me, and it even felt like I was improvising along with the cast from a lighting perspective, which, again, both exciting and a tiny bit stressful.
Yeah, sure. It sounds like you also had to improvise, just like the comedians had to improvise, just like the game master had to improvise. It's like this big improvising organism. Very cool. Sounds exciting, and also, as you said, stressful. I also believe that you had to do a lot of pre-production on this project. Maybe can you just quickly guide us through the pre-production process? What did it include, and how did you approach it?
Yeah, so pre-production on a project like this, I've already sort of touched on Amy Vorpahl and Ehlers Sheldon on their work with the story, and I was involved with some of that, but mostly that was very much their world, because at the end of the day, Amy's the one out there, I should say, at the head of the table, leading them on that adventure. But from a lighting perspective in pre-production, it's also improvised. So we needed to, at a very basic level, we needed to be able to see the actors as they moved about the room. Sometimes they stand up, mostly they're seated, but that's a consideration. We wanted to make sure that the lighting effects weren't overwhelming. Obviously, there's a casting component to all of this. There's a crewing up component. There's a budgetary component to all of this. And when it comes to budget, it's always very important to me that we're putting as much on the screen as possible, but also creating an environment that's a positive one for everyone in the cast and the crew. So, there's a lot of actual thought behind just keeping morale high on these long shooting days. And so I wanted to make it a creative, a collaborative environment. And, producer Rin and myself, Rin, I should say, also a sometime contributor to CineD, full disclosure there. We had met in university in a theater program, actually. So we wanted to feel like the vibe of this production had a theater sort of feel to it. And, maybe you'll get to talk to some of the cast, but hopefully we were able to make that happen. Because I think if behind the scenes it's sort of a stress-free and creative environment, then that comes across, in the final product. And all of these were things we thought about in pre-production as well. And we also thought about, how do you, from a post perspective, execute so much content on a timeline that makes sense. So we used Frame.io for just the note process, but we had to set all of that up and give some thought to that just in advance. Shout out to Matt Caron, who's head of post, for doing a lot of the heavy lifting there as well, even down to how do you promote a series, how do you market a series like this, what does the merchandise look like? There's a lot of cool merch out there too you can buy with Goblin Mode on it as well. So all of these are decisions that have to be made at some point. A lot of them happened in pre-production.
Yeah, actually that connects very good to my next question, because my next question is about the post-production, of course. I can imagine that it's a lot of material that you get, and you have multiple cameras, as you said. You have this huge campaign, you have different opinions from comedians when they talk about what happened. And how do you approach it? How do you come into the editing room and say, okay, now we have to cut 20 episodes, each of them should have suspense inside, right? People should want to watch more. As a director, what could you suggest maybe for people who also would like to do some project like this, and maybe talk about your experience of this project? How was it for you? How did you approach the post-production here?
You know, from a post-production perspective, Matt Caron has worked in this space for a long, long time. He's done other TTRPGs. He is an absolute fan of this medium. So shout out to him, because I instrumental part of this process. Also Adam Murray, who worked on a lot of the post part of this. So, I mean, if you're out there and you're wanting to start your own TTRPG experience and you're trying to film it, I think, in the back of my head, I always sort of think about kill your darlings, which is a phrase we hear sometimes. Just because I had a cool lighting effect that I figured out months and months, weeks and weeks ago, but it doesn't serve the story, you know what I mean? You should get rid of that, or if it cuts down on the momentum. That's just a lighting example, but it also could be a story example too. If we take too long on a side quest that's kind of slowing our momentum down slightly, or any of these things can happen. Just have a clear understanding of the goal of each episode. I think each episode should have a little mini arc to it, beginning, middle, and end, of course. Ideally, there's some suspense throughout, but I always come back to the core elements of telling a story, no matter what I'm doing in any medium. And because if you're taking the audience on an adventure that's appealing, you're doing the right thing. If you're like, ooh, we brought in this incredible camera for one day and we're not using any of those shots. I say that being very aware that I'm on CineD, which is a very primarily focused tech enterprise. But just understand that everything we do, even from a technology perspective, is to serve the story. So kill your darlings. And then there's a lot of organization required, obviously, on the post side. But I think also take the first couple episodes to really nail the tone in post of your series. Figure that out over episodes 1, 2, and 3, and then constantly iterate on episodes 1, 2, and 3. And then sort of once you have the vibes, the tone, how much drama versus comedy is whatever it is that you're working on, then continue that out through the other 17 episodes or however many you have to work on. So also go in with a plan, but be willing to kind of throw all that out as the cast and as your game master surprises you. You know what I mean? So you're not aiming for 100%. You're aiming for like an A- or a B+. So I'm letting you off the hook right now. You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming to tell an incredible story. So yeah, get past all the bells and whistles and just, have a beginning, middle, and end, and take people on a really compelling journey.
Sounds perfect. Yeah. Sounds like every project should be done, right?
Well, Masha, I bounce around between so many different genres. I take best practices from each of those genres and I try to meld them into whatever project I'm doing. I think we get hung up on, I'm making documentaries are like this. I'm making a scripted movies are like this. I fully reject that. You can take ideas from anywhere and translate them to what you're doing. Be incredibly skeptical if someone tells you, I'm on a commercial, this is how we do all commercials. I reject that thinking.
Yeah, no conventions for us. That's cool. I really like it. Maybe, Graham, what was the most fun part about this project for you? Because you talk a lot about journey, about writing, about story, about improvisation, and you seem really excited. And I was wondering, what was the most fun for you being on this project?
Yeah, the most fun part of this project for me is eventually, after I would say the first 2 episodes of production, we get into a rhythm and we know, okay, this is what we're making. The lighting cues are making, sense. We know we're going to put sound effects here. We know we're going to help land this moment here. That because it is a long format story, as I said, some episodes run between 1 hour 15 and 2.5 hours, give or take. I could really settle in, and I felt like I was watching a live stage show in the best sense. I felt like I was an audience member, which is not a feeling I've experienced very often as a director, a DP, or producer, because often the shot list is so specific, or we're chasing the sun, or there's a helicopter that we only have for 30 minutes or whatever. And there's all of those factors that in the field, I very rarely feel like I'm becoming a member of the audience. And on this show, I felt like I was in the audience. I was in the house and I was watching something that I loved. I was watching a cast of people who all really care for each other and all really respect one another in their best environment possible. And that's a really special thing. And that happens very early on this project. We were all sort of wondering, like, when would the cast chemistry really come together? And it happens so fast. It might have been from minute one. Seriously, I've really never seen anything like that. So my favorite part was getting to lean back, not fully, I'm still thinking about a bunch of stuff all at once, but becoming an audience member of something I'm working on and finding my love for it through wearing a hat of an audience member was really, really cool.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Actually, maybe then you can answer my question, because I think these shows are very popular at the moment, and they have been very popular for the, I don't know, maybe last 10, 15 years, maybe since the beginning of YouTube. Why? So as an audience member who was sitting throughout the show, why do you think people love these shows so much?
I sound like such a dummy, out of touch person that I only got into this genre 2.5, 3 years ago. I was the last one, and I should have started earlier, because I have been missing out over the last, decade or so that tabletop RPGs have been just exploding in popularity. I mean, these shows are getting more viewers than mainstream television networks in the United States on occasion, which is an insane thing for me to say, coming out of school and thinking, oh, I'll just work for the networks for my entire career. No, more people watch these kinds of projects, and that is both incredibly humbling, because I know it's a huge fan base out there that I want to make sure that they feel like they're being taken care of, and they're not being talked down to or any of those things. But, I think there's been a move to shorten our stories in the form of like TikToks or small social media bites, right? And this is the opposite of that. This is in my mind, the purest expression of storytelling. This brings us back to the original days when, hunters come back from the hunt and they're sitting around the campfire and they're telling the story of the hunt. This is Hero of a Thousand Faces stuff. This is long-form storytelling at its best. This is also not an easy listen, I think, or an easy watch, because it's asking something from the audience. It's asking you to help participate, to be a participant, and to help fill in the world around the campaign. And, we're all kind of being catered to from a storytelling perspective these days. And asking a little something from the audience member takes them on the journey with our cast. And that is what I think the secret sauce is of tabletop RPGs. So if you're listening to this and you might have heard about, some of these properties that I've mentioned, give it a shot, because it's going to be different from what maybe you're expecting. I hope I'm explaining it well here, but it's worth devoting a bit of time, because once you're in on this style of storytelling, you're all in.
So we already talked about the most exciting parts of this journey for you. Maybe can you also share the most challenging part, or what would you do differently if you had a chance on this project?
You always go into something with best laid plans, and there's always ways to optimize. I will say, how would I do things differently? I mean, some of it's budgetary, restrictions. Maybe I would add more cameras. I will say, I'm going to tease that there are also some guests that show up throughout the season. Maybe a couple, I don't know. There's also some Easter eggs hidden around the set, actually. We gave some thought to the background behind people. There's a tapestry that might be worth looking at on the set, if you can see that in any of the camera angles. There's a gigantic goblin behind everyone that has specific colored eyes. So there's various things that we've hidden for people to sort of figure out as we go. I think we learned a lot from the post side of this. I think we could even turn around. It's like, but these are typical sort of season 1 things. We're now sort of optimized, hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to do a season 2 of Goblin Mode. Obviously, you guys out there watching and commenting helps, stuff like that. So yeah, just generally optimizing a bunch of the various workflow aspects that we kind of had to figure out, from zero. But there's so many smart people behind the scenes on this, just from the post side, the audio side, the camera department side, that I was really surrounded by people that had answers in almost any instance I could think of. And that's just been very, very nice to have these folks on set, because you don't feel like you're going into something like this alone, right? It's a really big team. I didn't do a head count, but I don't know, many as 25 people working on everything from the socials to the logo to the press releases to the merchandise. I mean, it's really an incredible team to work with, and that makes running into those tricky pitfalls of production much harder to do, because you just have support.
Yeah, I think people don't really realize, people who watch such shows, they don't really realize how many people are involved into making it and how huge of an effort it is, because it's not like you just put 3 cameras or 4 cameras, I don't know, and then record it and cut it and put it on YouTube. You also build the set, right? You also have something built. So I assume you had production designers. You also have motion graphics, right? You also have all the characters in 2D. Maybe you can also talk a little bit about this aspect, because we haven't touched on it yet.
Yes. So, oh my gosh. Yeah, you brought up production design. Shout out to Clint Carney for the carved goblin face at the back of the set, the far camera side, which is carved. Think about the time requirements of that. There are character portraits. There's animation around the character portraits. There's logos. There's 3D environments that you see sometimes on the television in the center of the table where the players are. And then sometimes we go full screen with those environments to give people a sense of, the world, the location that they're walking into. I mean, there's just so many different people involved in making something like this. I mean, Goblin Mode has end credits, of course. Not always the case in actual digital shows, but it was very important to me to show, Alex Winkler, our incredible composer who did original music for this, who did the main theme. I mean, so many folks operating at the top of their game. And we're lucky to get to make this for Geek and Sundry, to have support from Nerdist. And the parent company for Geek and Sundry and Nerdist is Legendary, who just famously made Dune 2 most recently. And we were able to get support from, some of the same people working on the Dune properties and the Godzilla movies and Lost in Space for Netflix and Carnival Row. So these big properties, and to have support from people at the top of their game at Legendary with our parent company too, has just been incredible to see. So I say we are small but mighty, and we're also part of a Geek and Sundry brand reboot. It's a storied, it's a beloved brand in the nerd space, and I'm so happy that Geek and Sundry is coming back with original content like Goblin Mode. I hope it's just the beginning, and more is coming. Fingers crossed.
Actually, it's impressive that you can pull something like that off, because also for people who play it, of course they enjoy watching it, and I think it's a huge thing to see some of their favorite worlds on screen, also played by talented people and filmed by talented people as you are. Yeah. Do you have something else to add? Is there anything we didn't touch on concerning this show?
So Masha, I think you're going to hear from Amy Vorpahl, who is the DM, the game master of Goblin Mode. And Amy's going to have a lot of insight into world building and how to craft a story like this and how to craft such a long form story. So I would say, Amy's going to have a lot of great insight into that. But in terms of, what should you do to start a TTRPG experience of your own at home? I mean, the biggest thing you could do is, we have a comments section at CineD. Feel free to write in the comments, hey, I'm trying to start this thing. Do you have any, insight? And the easiest thing for us as writers and contributors is to be specific about your question, not kind of general stuff. No, I'm starting episode 2 and I ran into this. Because very often we can answer questions like that. And that's one of the coolest parts about, being a member of the CineD community, is seeing questions like that from you guys. And I think there's a feeling that I see from folks like they're overwhelmed. How do they start something like this? I just mentioned, 25 or so people that worked on this project. Maybe you don't have access to 25 people for your project. That's okay. Start filming with one camera in a wide shot if you have to. And just try to stay out of the way of the story. Try every decision, make it to serve your core story, and you will make something compelling that people like to watch. It's the scariest thing in the world for a creative person to hit publish or to hit export. And I just want people out there to know that everyone at any stage of their creative process, at their, any stage of their career, we're all feeling the same thing. It doesn't matter what the budget is on a project that I'm directing or producing or working on. We're still using gaff tape just off screen to try to fix something. We're all doing the same thing. My cameras are not different than your cameras. Just start making something and you're going to kill it, and just keep publishing and the audience will come. And that's it. Maybe we leave it there from my point of view. Exactly.
I think that I'm totally with you. I think that most important part is that you have fun. If you do a project like this, you should have fun. You should, maybe gather your friends who also would like to play, and just play with them and just put a camera, as Graham said, and let it roll and see where a story will bring you. And you will surely find a community that will love to watch your stories. Yes, Graham, thank you so much for taking your time. Thank you for giving all the insights on technical stuff, on pre-production, on post-production, and also thank you for all the inspiring words for people who are watching us at the moment. And for you guys, thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to our CineD channel.